You've heard of killer clowns from outer space? Well, now we've got killer clowns from creepy abandoned buildings. The nice thing about doing this YouTube channel is from time to time, I get to discover new things about myself, things that I may not have previously noticed before, and things that might not have ever occurred to me. And thanks to this movie Terrifier, requested by some good old people over on my Discord, go check it out, I've learnt that clowns are terrifying. I've never had a problem with clowns before, but well, now we got a big problem. So you're telling me that us as a society has deemed that socially acceptable for years? Yeah, no thanks. The movie begins with us seeing a televised interview of the sole survivor of a horrific massacre. We get brief glimpses of the woman's disfigured face throughout the interview, but every time it does cut to her, the TV decides to display static. Maybe she's a ghost or something. Well, more like an alien creature from Doctor Who by the looks of the effects, but I would be lying if I said that wasn't at least a little bit unsettling. You know, the usual reaction to seeing ugly people. We learn that her attacker was named Art the Clown, and he supposedly died during the massacre incident. But apparently not, because the next thing we know, someone with big old clown feet kicks and destroys a miniature TV. We then see someone who could really benefit from visiting a dentist, putting on a clown costume, applying makeup, and gathering a bag full of weapons. Just what every clown needs. A hammer. We then see the interview host backstage in her dressing room, talking to somebody on the phone about how disgusting that woman's face is and how she almost gagged at one point. But it would turn out that the victim of the massacre is actually hiding in the room with her, and she responds to these disgusting comments by forcing her fingers into her eyes and severely disfiguring her too. Now they can form a club. We learn that it's Halloween night, and we see two women named Tara and Dawn walking down the street after a night of partying. They end up getting into a little argument as Tara refuses to let Dawn drive in her current state because I'd imagine that she isn't exactly the biggest fan of dying in a drunk driving incident. But then they notice this creepy black and white clown staring at them both in the distance. Dawn jokingly shouts over to the clown asking for his number, and then we get to see why this movie is named Terrifier. I hope you enjoy the nightmares. The pair decide that it's best to head to a pizza place and grab a bite to eat to sober up, but as they're sitting down, the creepy clown walks in behind them, takes a seat, and begins to intensely stare at Tara. Like, really staring at her, until he then randomly decides to smile before doing a bunch of different poses. I think this might be the part where you'd want to run for your life, because the next logical step here is death. Dawn, being the beacon of amazing ideas that she is, decides that it'd be a great idea to go up to this creepy looking, totally not a murderer clown, sit on his lap, and straight up manhandle him to take a selfie. And after being fondled by Dawn and giving Tara a ring for some strange reason, he does something to annoy the owner so much that it results in him being kicked out of the place. Once Dawn and Tara are done eating their one slice of pizza, they now decide that they're sober enough to drive home. Try telling that to a cop, but once they reach their car, they realize that they're not exactly going anywhere quick because suspiciously one of their tires is flat. So they're stuck there waiting as Tara calls her sister Victoria, and the pair are forced to wait around for her to come pick them up. Back at the pizza place, the cook comes out of the bathroom after being forced to clean it, revealing that the clown must have been kicked out for blasting ass in there. And apparently, repainting their bathroom with bodily fluids wasn't enough, as the cook discovers the decapitated head of his boss, hollowed out with candles inside, as if his head is a pumpkin that you display on your porch. The clown, which is probably safe to assume is Art, apparently is really offended at the whole being kicked out incident, as when the cook reaches for the phone, Art uses a cleaver to take off his fingers before stabbing him in the face, taking him to the ground, and then repeatedly stabbing him in the face until there isn't really any face left to stab. We see back with the women, now waiting in their car for Victoria to come, but Tara really needs to use the restroom and refuses to go anywhere in public. They spot a pest control worker standing outside of a nearby building, so Tara approaches the man and asks him if she could use the bathroom, which doesn't seem like the safest and smartest thing to do, but to be honest, approaching this random stranger and going into an unfamiliar abandoned building with him isn't the least smart thing they've done all night. Dawn is waiting in the car, taking selfies and listening to the radio while Tara does her business, when all of a sudden, the radio broadcaster announces that two bodies have just been located at the exact pizza place they were just at, also revealing that the police are looking for somebody in a black and white clown costume. And as she's looking down at her phone, The car door opens and she thinks Tara sits next to her. Except it isn't Tara, it's Art. Because of course it is. And he really doesn't like unsolicited selfies. As Tara finishes up in the bathroom, she encounters a strange woman who lives in the building, holding a doll in her arms that she believes is her baby daughter. And after walking away from that rather strange situation, she walks into another, stranger situation as she encounters Art just standing there like this. Yeah, no thanks. She runs away from the absolutely terrifying clown standing right in front of her and starts hiding among some old disused cars in the building. She's terrified, trying to be quiet while watching him, as he begins to walk around being as creepy as possible. And a lot of the creepiness comes from how Art carries himself. It's as if he went to mime school to learn how to move this way, but instead of using his skills to entertain people, he uses them to be as horrifying as possible. She loses sight of him for a second, and she thinks that she might actually be free from this absolutely terrifying clown, but nope. He sneaks up right behind her and begins mauling the back of her leg with a scalpel. He just had the perfect opportunity to kill her, but as we'll later discover, Art isn't exactly known for doing things in the most efficient of ways. He clearly loves to torment his victims. Isn't that like the opposite of what a clown is supposed to do? The way into the building is padlocked now, so Tara is forced to try and find another way out, and apparently this building doesn't have any easily accessible windows downstairs, because for some reason, Tara heads upstairs where she can see the exterminator. The only problem being is that he's wearing headphones and can't hear her screams for help as Art appears out of nowhere and snatches her up, and as he's got hold of her out of the exterminator's view, he injects her with something, causing her to pass out. Which is actually pretty lucky, all things considered. This is the only time in the movie where he doesn't just straight up savagely kill someone as soon as he's got the chance. Well, there is another time, but I'm pretty sure that he was in a rush then. She wakes up, restrained to a chair with her mouth covered, as Art sits on the floor next to her, rummaging through his bag of goodies. He frightens her a few times by pretending to hit her with a weapon, because apparently that really gets the serotonin flowing, before he then returns to his bag and retrieves a saw. But this saw isn't for Tara. He walks over to the other side of the room, where we can see a large sheet draped over something. He removes the sheet to reveal that Dawn is chained up by her feet, hanging from the ceiling with her legs apart. And after removing her underwear, Art takes the saw and begins cutting her right down the middle. Yep, starting between her legs. Come on man, at least buy her a drink before you get in her pants. He cuts right through her body, down to her skull in a matter of seconds. And I'm no expert in cutting people down the middle, it has been a while, but something tells me that it would take slightly longer than that. While watching her friend get turned into two friends, Tara is able to break free from her restraints, knock Art to the ground, and stab him once in the back, instead of, I don't know, maybe killing the psychopathic murderous clown and ensuring his safety at the same time? Just a thought. After running away from the room, full of potential evil clown-killing weapons, Tara decides now is the time to fight back, and hits him over the back of the head. She's able to knock him to the ground, but apparently she's a firm believer in never kick a man when he's down, as she literally just stands there shouting at him, waiting for him to get back to his feet before she attacks him again. Except in doing so, she's given him the chance to pull out a gun and shoot her in the leg with it. Are you trying to die? He walks up to her and shoots her a second time, before aiming the gun at her head. But Tara's the main character, he's obviously not just gonna... Oh. Victoria arrives to find the women's car abandoned. She texts Tara's phone, but on account of her having 3 bullets in her, Art has taken the phone and lures Victoria to the back of the building by saying Tara is sick. Yeah, sick and tired of getting shot in the face. He finally gives Dawn the selfie that she so desperately wanted, before walking up to a somehow still alive Tara. So does this mean that she might actually make it out of this? I don't think she'll be making it out of this. Art looks up to see that the strange woman from before has just witnessed all of this, and he gives her a nice non-threatening wave before she runs off. She runs to the exterminator, who is still somehow unaware of all the murder and gunfire going on here. Man, those must be some good headphones. She's manically trying to tell him that there's some sort of psycho going around the building and offing girls, but he thinks that she's just some crazy homeless woman and pushes her off him. He walks away and starts to ring one of his co-workers, but Art sneaks up behind him, taps him on the shoulder, and then hits him over the head with a hammer. The woman returns to her pushchair to discover that her baby, well, doll, has been taken. She begins frantically looking around the building for it, and eventually comes across Art. He's sitting down, holding the baby and indicating for her to be quiet so she doesn't wake the baby. She approaches him and asks, "Is there any kindness in you?" You know, to the guy who's just sliced a woman from vagina to mouth in front of her best friend. Doubt it, but it's worth an ask, I guess. To which he responds by looking at her like this, before she starts to hug him as he sucks on his blood-covered thumb. God, this clown has got some issues. Victoria, still unaware as to what's going on, rings Dawn's phone, and there's no answer, but she can hear the ringtone. She follows the sound that leads her down into the basement, where she comes across Dawn, sliced down the middle, with a puddle of guts laying beneath her. She makes a run for it, as I'm sure most people would after finding that, but she then hears what she thinks is Tara's screams. With not a very good track record of following noises through this creepy abandoned building, she follows the screams that lead her to who she thinks is Tara. But as we all know, Tara's a little bit too busy dealing with the fact that she's dead to do any screaming. Victoria then sees on the other side of the room the homeless woman with a scalped head and both of her breasts removed, before Art, who she believes to be Tara, sits up wearing the hair and the breasts of the homeless woman. She's trying to quickly find a way out of the building when we then see Art slowly walking up the stairs, completely naked, wearing the hair and the severed breasts of the homeless woman. Victoria's clearly been playing a lot of Alien Isolation and decides to hide in the locker, but as Art walks into the room pretending to look for her, he knows exactly where she is and starts trying to force his way into the locker, but she's saved just in the nick of time as the co-worker the exterminator was on the phone to shows up to try and see what's going on with his buddy. After having the misfortune of finding a spare key hidden under the entry mat, poor security by the way, he spots a trail of bloody footprints, and as he's a character in a horror movie, he doesn't immediately leave the premises and call the police. He follows the trail and it leads him to the doll of the homeless woman. But of course, Art isn't exactly a fan of people touching his doll, so he appears from behind the man, stabs him through the skull, and with the blade still inserted into the man's cranium, he uses his other hand to sever through the man's neck before pulling his head from his shoulders. Victoria begins to try and sneak her way out of the building, because yeah, she probably should hurry up and do that. And as she's trying to force her way through a locked door, Art appears around the corner from her, just casually having a little ride on his mini tricycle, being incredibly creepy and unsettling in the process, I might add, before deciding that he's had enough and just riding off in the opposite direction. It's so weird and goofy, yet so genuinely unnerving at the same time. Like, can you not do that, please? Victoria makes her way into a different part of the building and then stops to think what she should do next. At least I think that's why she stopped, because she kinda just squats there admiring the sights and doing nothing. Art sneaks up behind her, because apparently he's really good at doing that, and he begins trying to suffocate her with plastic wrap, but seems genuinely surprised when she's easily able to break free from it by just, well, tearing it. You know, what literally anybody could do with ease. It's plastic wrap. And he just looks at it all like, how could this cheap dollar store plastic wrap possibly tear? I'm pretty sure that this was just a joke about people dying to easily escapable things in horror movies. And that's fine really. We are watching a movie about a murderous clown who looks like this after all. She stabs him in the foot with a nail, he flips her off, which is absolutely hilarious by the way, and she makes a run for it, but she doesn't get far before coming across the remains of her sister with about 20 bullet holes in her skull. And that's never good. As she's crying about finding her dead sister, Art sneaks up behind her and begins whipping her with a bladed chain, because apparently he likes to kill everybody else instantly except these two sisters. As he's having fun slicing away at her, the exterminator who took a hammer to the head earlier regains consciousness and repays the favor by knocking Art unconscious instead. They lock themselves in some sort of security room where the man uses a phone to contact the police and ask for help, but they know that staying in this spot would mean a death sentence, so they keep moving. They come across a padlocked door, because apparently this building is from a Resident Evil game and everything is locked. And as the man is looking around for something to break the lock open with, Art appears and instead breaks the man's head open by repeatedly stomping on his skull until eventually it gives in and pops like a grape. There's no regaining consciousness from that one. Conveniently for Victoria, but not so convenient for the guy who just got his brains crushed. She finds something to break the lock open with, and stabs Art in the eye as she's squeezing her way through the door. An eye for an eye. Well, a dead sister, dead sister's friend, dead homeless woman, and dead exterminator for an eye. but you get it. She finds another padlocked door, because apparently this building has more locked doors than it does dead people, but this time, she's able to force her way through the door. But Art chooses a far less subtle approach, and instead rams a truck through the doors, dancing to music as he does it, hitting and knocking out Victoria in the process. I guess she didn't dodge that dodge. Oh god. The police finally arrive, but when they do, Art is hunched over Victoria's body, chomping down on something. They aim their guns at him and tell him to put his hands up, but he pulls out a gun of his own, puts it in his mouth, and pulls the trigger. And as the police take a closer look, they discover that Victoria is still somehow alive. Well, her sister did survive 3 gunshot wounds, one of them being to the face, so there's no real surprise there. Remember kids, eat your vegetables. The bodies are then taken to be examined by the coroner, and after he sees the guy that got his brain stomped in, he opens the bag containing Art. But as he does so, the lights in the room begin to flicker on and off, and when they do eventually stop and he turns around, Art grabs him by the throat and begins to strangle him to death. Because the psychotic murderous clown is supernatural. Sure, why not? We then see that it's 1 year later at the hospital, and Victoria is finally being discharged after the incident. And when we see her face, it's exactly the same as the Doctor Who alien lady from the beginning of the movie, and to top it off, she is also going to be interviewed on TV. Just like the victim that we saw being interviewed at the beginning, Art went on a massacre, severely disfigured the final victim leaving her alive, was killed during the incident, and then supposedly went missing while at the coroner's office. The cycle repeats. It would appear that I've tackled this movie kind of out of order, as going into this movie I thought that it was its own standalone thing, but during the production of this video I've gone to find out that there was actually a 2011 short movie called Terrifier, which by looking at the trailer does serve to be the building blocks for what would become this movie, as well as Art the Clown featuring in a 2013 movie called All Hallows Eve. So by the looks of things, I've got some catching up to do, and I might want to get on that soon, because I've also just discovered that everybody's favourite clown is getting a sequel that's due to be released next year. Ah, so that's why they made him supernatural. Terrifier is one of those low-budget horror movies that manages to stick out amongst the piles of schlock that are usually associated with low-budget horror movies. I'm not saying that it's revolutionary or groundbreaking in any way, but I don't think that's what it's trying to be. It wants to be a creepy, fun, weird, enjoyable horror movie, and it does succeed in doing that. And what I would definitely say is that Terrifier features a villain that is genuinely unnerving in both appearance and action. And if we're being entirely honest, that's not something that you could easily say about most modern horror movies. Before we wrap things up, I'd like to give a big shout out to my patrons. A big thank you to Dom, Hunters263, Rebecca Pitts, Total Drama Rebooted, A Dandy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Rin and Whiskey, Jarrett C. Bees, Nicholas, Pascal Mathis, John, Alex X. Jackson, Fighting the Pirates, Tajvia Sandhu, Amy Denver, Victor Kartelov, Richard McGowan III, Kyle York, Eddie Shivink, Macy J, Reese Harford, and Horatio. I'm sure you guys have heard the story before and know it all, but your continuous support to the channel is very inspiring for me. YouTube's very iffy about monetizing this sort of content, so it's never really guaranteed that I'm going to earn any monetization for what I do. So the fact that there are people out there who are actually willing to financially support the channel is just incredibly inspiring to me. So thank you so much guys, you're greatly appreciated. The channel's also got a Discord, so if you'd like to discuss this movie or other movies in general with like-minded people, there is a place where you can come together to do just that. And if you'd like to leave a movie recommendation for the series, that would be the best place to do it. So once again, thank you so much to my patrons, and thank you to everyone else for watching.